Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. So this is part 2 of my 3-part Batman rant, and this rant will be focusing on Batman Gotham by Gaslight. So hope you guys enjoy. Now this next one is going to be a doozy because I was actually angry after watching the movie. But I will say that before you get 60% of the way, it was pretty good and I was enjoying it. So the next movie that I watched after Bat Ninja was Batman Gotham by Gaslight, and this is basically like a Victorian era Gotham City, where Jack the Ripper is running loose. Don't know why he's in America, but he's in America, I guess. So Bruce Wayne is still acting as Batman, but he's got he doesn't really have a armored suit. It's kind of just like a not a trench coat, but just like a little coat with the bat symbol on it, which I thought was pretty funny, and an interesting design choice. But movie starts out with Poison Ivy, who is at this point just she's a stripper, and she is dancing for these men at this club, and they are like, take it all off, whatever, and she doesn't, so she ends up leaving, and this man ends up following her, which, being a woman myself, I was like, oh, why are you making the choices you're making right now? So she walks into an alleyway, a closed off alleyway for some reason, and turns and oh, you've been following me for a little bit, I can make your night worthwhile. So she's also a prostitute, what I found out at that point. Dang, Poison Ivy, what are you doing? Things are not at all what you're used to with this Batman movie. So anybody could be anybody, literally. So Poison Ivy was a stripper and a prostitute. So she tries to seduce this man who's been following her, and as soon as she gets close enough to put her hands on him, he just cuts her up. So enter Jack the Ripper at that point. Yeah, that was pretty bad. This is definitely not, I wouldn't think, a movie for young kids, so just be wary of that. So then the next scene goes to a meeting with the mayor, Jim Gordon, or James Gordon, I think he goes by in this movie, and let's see, Harvey Bulldog Bullock, who is just basically this jerk who works in the police force. And these townspeople are showing up. They're like, hey, why aren't you doing anything? Jack the Ripper is super scary, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, it's we're doing the best that we can, blah, blah, blah. So then Selena Kyle walks in, and she's like, well, if all these women that were getting killed by Jack the Ripper were rich or had some kind of influence, he would have been caught already, basically calling him out. Which I was a little bit surprised by, but I was also good for you. So then Bruce Wayne shows up, and he is talking to this nun that was there, who was agreeing with Selena, and he kind of takes her away from the scene that's going on to try and help her calm down. So him, the nun, whose name is Leslie, and James Gordon, they ride off in this carriage, and they're talking about all the stuff that's going on. So then you get to see that Bruce Wayne, when he was made an orphan, he ended up being taken care of by the nun, Leslie. So he has a soft spot for her. So once the meeting scene is done, we then cut back to the nighttime where he's on his patrol, and we see Selena, who's walking out late at night on purpose to try and lure out Jack the Ripper, so she might be able to take care of him or something. But things don't work out the way that she thought, and she ends up getting in trouble, and Batman comes in at the right time just to save her, and she's like, why'd you do that? I can take care of myself, blah blah. He's like, no. So in the next scene, Harvey Dent, Bruce Wayne, and Selena Kyle end up meeting up to go out and do something. Harvey brought Selena on as a date, because he was really infatuated with her, being kind of a dangerous woman. They end up just walking around town and end up walking to Bruce's club, the Dionysus Club, which is a gentleman's club. And Selena pretends, well, she doesn't really dress, she kind of dresses up as a man, but it's I think it's pretty clear that she's not, but I guess it slides for the security. So they end up going in there talking, and Bruce finds out that Selena was also taken care of by the nun Leslie. So they both kind of have that connection there, being orphans. And yeah, so when Bruce like is kind of talking about that, he makes the connection that a lot of the victims of Jack the Ripper were taken care of by the nun Leslie. So maybe Jack the Ripper would like try and go after her and get her or something. Which for me, I like to try and like put the mystery together myself at the beginning, or like I guess throughout the movie. And I was thinking like that doesn't make any sense, because Jack the Ripper is only supposed to be going after like prostitutes and like women of the night and things like that. But I guess he made an exception for this nun who's supposed to be doing God's work, and he takes her out. So Bruce shows up as Bruce, sees that Leslie has passed, and for some reason he doesn't call for anybody. He doesn't call for the police. I think the only thing he ends up doing is collecting a piece of evidence, which he has a Dionysus pin from the Gentleman's Club. So he's like, oh, like this person has to be wealthy or something like that. And then he ends up leaving, and someone sees that he like walks up, sees the nun's body, and walks away. And her name is Marlene, which I think is supposed to be a play on Harleen. So because she does sound like Harley, which I thought was cute. But yeah, it didn't make any sense. So when they get to the funeral, whenever that happens, Marlene approaches Bruce Wayne, and she's like, I know you did it. I saw you there. Like, you're the murderer. You're Jack the Ripper, blah, 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 in front of everybody. And Bruce doesn't really do anything to, like, dispel this rumor or, like, put anybody's mind at ease. He's just like, I don't know this lady. I'm gonna leave. And, which... in front of the police commissioner was there too. James Gordon was there, and he didn't like go over to talk to him about it or nothing. He's just like, I'm gonna bounce. So that just made him look even more guilty. But before he tries to leave, there are these three orphans, Dickie, Jason, and Timmy, which for those who know is like a play on the Robins and stuff. They like are trying to approach people and like pickpocket them because they're living on the streets and they weren't taken in by nun Leslie, so they're like doing all these little petty jobs and stuff. And Alfred, he stops them, and then he's like, you know, for some pickpockets you're pretty sloppy, because he ends up catching Jason, maybe it was one of them, and he's like, you know, I can hire you guys, so that way you guys can have some food and I think like a little bit of money. And so they end up taking that deal, which was all that they were really there for, was to take that deal in that scene. Oh, right. But I forgot. Before Marlene ends up approaching Bruce at the funeral, Hugo Strange approaches Bruce and is like, first, this was a really weird thing, but I think he knew he was Batman, because he's like, I think I know who Jack the Ripper is. If only I could talk to Batman. Like, if you could contact Batman, which I don't know why he thought Bruce Wayne would be able to. But he's like, if you could contact Batman, like, I could tell him who it is, and, like, all this stuff would be over with. So, Batman ends up trying to go see Hugo Strange, but Jack the Ripper beats him to the punch, because Jack the Ripper's at the funeral, so it's, like, another little hint as to, like, who it might be. Jack the Ripper, like, throws Hugo Strange into this pit with all these other, people who are in the asylum, who end up, like, tearing him apart. Don't know why they did that. Like, I get that they're supposed to be, like, insane, but that doesn't mean you're violent, necessarily, but I guess these guys were. And, they end up tearing him apart, so Batman doesn't get any information out of that. So, just as he's trying to leave, the police are like, oh my god, like, Hugo Strange been killed, blah, blah, oh my god, there's Batman! So then they think Batman is Jack the Ripper, because they just seen, like, Hugo Strange, or do they? I don't know if they think he's Jack the Ripper, but they know that they think he's a murderer. So they're chasing after him and like shooting at him, all this stuff. So his costume gets all torn up. And just as like he's about to get caught, Selena Kyle rides through on a carriage and like picks him up, and like his mask is like pretty ripped up at that point. So it's pretty easy to see that Batman is Bruce Wayne. And you know, the storyline with Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle. So they end up sleeping together. While they're like together in the nighttime, Marlene is killed by Jack the Ripper as well, which didn't make any sense. Like, I get Jack the Ripper killing Hugo Strange because he knew who he was, or at least he was saying he knew, but he kills Marlene, who was not a lady of the night, and was actually blaming Bruce Wayne and saying that he was Jack the Ripper, so it would have been smarter to leave her alive. But Jack the Ripper is just, I wouldn't even say bending the rules, because it seems like he doesn't have any at this point. He's just killing people left and right. So he ends up killing Marlene, and because Marlene had accused Bruce Wayne at the funeral, the police go find him, and Harvey, who somehow knows that he's like in Selena's hotel, even that was like their first like night together, so I don't know, that was a little bit weird. But he's like angry at Bruce. So then once they're in court, like he gets Bruce prosecuted and sent to Blackgate. So when Bruce gets to Blackgate Penitentiary, Selena goes to visit him, and she's like, listen, if you just say that you're Batman, like they'll know that you didn't kill Marlene because Batman wasn't there, whatever. And he's like, no, like I'm not gonna say that. And she's like, okay, well, I've got a Batarang, and I'll go tell Gordon right now, so you can get out and you can save all these girls that are being killed by Jack the Ripper. So that's what she goes to do. And I thought that was pretty funny because like I think it's pretty rare that people go against the main character's wishes, or just like, well, screw you, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. So that's what she did. Bruce, not wanting the secret to get out, stages a prison fight and is able to escape that way. And it was actually like a little funny scene where he dresses up as a guard, and so he walks out of the prison and he meets these two other guards who are like looking at him for a second. He's like, what are you doing? There's a prison fight, go get him, go get him. So then they're like, oh okay. So then they just run in there, ignoring the dude that had come out to tell them that like there was a fight going on. But that was a whole other thing. But while Bruce was in jail, he sent out like a little coded message so that way the Dickie, Jason, and Timmy would bring him his equipment and stuff. So he ends up suiting up as Batman and riding off on a bat cycle to go stop Selena from telling James Gordon his secret. So then the worst part of this movie happens, which is so unfortunate because it's at the very end. Selena goes to meet up with James Gordon, and they're walking around in this abandoned fair. And like, if you've seen other Batman movies, the only person who walks around in an abandoned fair is a bad guy or the Joker, which, I mean, Joker is a bad guy, but that was just weird. I would have, if I was Selena, that would have been like a red flag for me, but it was not for her, I guess. So while Selena's out there trying to talk to James, Batman goes to James Gordon's house because he thinks like he might be able to stop him at his house or something, or meet him there before Selena gets to him. And he kind of, this is like the second time that he's broken in this movie. Like the first time he was just kind of standing in his yard, but now he's actually in his house. So he goes in his house and he sees that there's like this little cupboard below the stairs. And he ends up like opening it up, and he sees like jars of all these different body parts and stuff, and like pictures of like horrible things and blood. There's like blood everywhere. So it becomes very clear who Jack the Ripper is, and this makes absolutely no sense. But before I talk about that, I didn't know like why he had all that stuff, other than just like he's Jack the Ripper, but like I didn't think Jack the Ripper was like harvesting all this crap or whatever. According to the Wikipedia, he was like a Civil War doctor, so I guess the Civil War made him go crazy or something, which is never really explained, or at least I don't remember it being explained that way. So like Gordon's wife, Barbara, which I didn't know that Gordon's wife's name was Barbara, so at first I was like, that is just weird. Why would she have that name? But now that I know, I'm like, okay, makes more sense. But Barbara, she's like, oh, you shouldn't be in here. Like, James is going to be mad, blah, blah, blah. And he's like you knew that he was doing this and you didn't try to like stop him or whatever. And she's like, he's doing God's work, blah, blah, blah. So he had like, made her lose her mind as well too. And then you see like she turns to her side, or like one side of her face is like covered in chemical burns and stuff, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because you see her earlier in the movie and you don't see that she has chemical burns. So I don't know if she was always standing like this. Like, I would have thought that was kind of weird. But yeah, he like got to her too, which didn't make any sense. And it gets even worse when Batman rushes to go save Selina, because now he's like, oh my god, she's meeting with Jack the Ripper alone. So Selina ends up finding out that James is Jack the Ripper, because he's carrying around like this case full of his equipment to like cut women up and stuff. So he ends up like opening it up and like attacking her. Then Batman comes in and they're like fighting on this Ferris wheel, and he's like, why are you doing this? Why did you like hurt your wife if you're only supposed to be attacking women of the streets? Like, why did you hurt the nun lady? So he starts off with this. This was again a very stupid speech. He's like, well, that nun was turning these women into prostitutes and like strippers and all this other stuff, like sex workers. And like, no, like she wasn't doing that. Like, they were just doing that because they needed to make some money, and like that was the only way that they could. That's not what Batman said, but that's what I was thinking. I'm like, what the heck? So, which didn't justify, like, it, I don't know. That's why he killed her. We know he was killing ladies of the night because, like, he thinks that they're impure or whatever. And James Gordon was, like, he said that he was going to purify the town, which I didn't think much of it when he said that. But now that I, like, put the pieces together, I'm like, okay, I guess. So then he's like, well, why did you burn your wife or whatever? And he's like, he says that wives are the biggest whores of them all. And this was another point where I paused the movie and I'm like, really? Really, man? A woman who has been faithfully married to you is one of the biggest whores in your eyes. Really? At that point, I concluded that he just hated women and wanted an excuse to hurt them. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And the fact that he's Jack the Ripper also didn't make any sense. Like, I didn't really have a clear idea as to who the suspect was, but I was putting my money on Harvey Dent. Because he just seemed like, after the whole, like, he was mad at Bruce for, like, trying to, well, he did sleep with his woman. But, you know, Harvey Dent is a bad dude because he's Two-Face. He ends up becoming Two-Face at some point. It was, I was hurt when I saw that. So the whole rest of the movie, I was just, like, watching them fight and, like, talk about this nonsense that he was like trying to justify in his head. And the Ferris wheel ends up catching on fire. And it was also, well, no, that's later. But the Ferris wheel catches on fire, and Batman's like fighting James, and he ends up like beating him. And I think he was like trying to take him in, like arrest him or whatever. Like, you can come with me, like we'll like try and get you turned around, whatever, like that kind of thing, like the good guy thing. And James just runs into the fire, and that's the end for him. So then the Ferris wheel like falls over, but Selina and Batman just barely escape. Then Alfred pulls up out of nowhere with the kids. They like get them out of there, and they're like, well, I hope this area turns into something good in the future. And I don't even know what they're referencing there, but yeah, that was awful. Like, it wasn't a bad movie, but that was a terrible ending. Especially because I was trying to figure out the mystery myself. Like, I was looking at Jack the Ripper because Bruce said something earlier in the movie, like, oh, he's like a fighter, a boxer. He's like built like has a very athletic build or something. And I was comparing people's builds and stuff. And yes, Gordon's build does match Jack the Ripper, but I would just that was completely off of my radar. So I'm like, I don't know who it is. Oh, and just to add another note, since I didn't say it in the video, I have no problem with like being wrong when it comes to mysteries. Like, I think I would actually prefer that because, you know, that helps me. I don't know. It feels like I'm learning something in becoming a better quote unquote detective or something. It's just like a, oh wow, I would have never expected that kind of thing. And it's entertaining. But Gordon being Jack the Ripper, there was little to no clues really to figure it out other than the purification line, I feel. Because like the boxing thing, you see that after you already entered his freaking evil red room cave thing, and figuring out that he was a Civil War surgeon, you don't figure that out until you're in his evil room thing. And the sight of his wife's face, like that threw me for a loop. But yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this movie. I still feel like I enjoyed most of it, just that ending was not good in my opinion. But yes, that concludes the end of this rant. So the next one is going to be focusing on the Dark Knight Returns movies, 1 and 2. So if you guys like this sort of video, make sure to leave me a like and tell me down in the comments below what you guys thought of the movie and if you guys enjoyed the ending or not. I'm curious to see other people's perspectives on this. But also don't forget to subscribe to become a part of the community. And with that being said, I hope you all have a nice evening, morning, or night. Whatever it is, enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!